Hey, everybody. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie Powder. Enjoy the movie. A pregnant woman is brought to the hospital who has just been struck by lightning. Unfortunately, only the baby was saved, and he was born albino. The father asked to see the newborn, who was placed in an incubator. The brainwave meter shows too much activity. "That's not my son," the man said, and cried. Some time passed. The strange child was raised by his grandparents, but they passed away. Turns out the albino was kept in the basement by his relatives. Sheriff Barnum brought in child psychologist Jesse Caldwell. Neighbors say the kid's mentally retarded, some kind of freak. Maybe there's a reason the old folks kept him hidden from everyone. The sheriff and the psychologist went down to the basement. The kid sat in the dark and said in a calm voice that his name was Powder. Finally, the guy showed himself. Jeremy, that's Powder's real name. The sheriff couldn't take his eyes off such an unusual man. Jeremy says he can stay outside as long as the sun's not too high. He has a painful sensitivity to light. Sometimes dark glasses don't help. Powder never went to school. Although he likes to read, he has a phenomenal memory. The guy asked Jesse to name any page in a book and from memory told exactly what was written there. He knows by heart all the books in his considerable library. Powder, wearing dark glasses and an old grandfather's suit, left the basement. As he passed near the police cars, a siren suddenly went off. Only now did the sheriff notice that the roof of the house was rigged with lightning rods, and the deputy said the dead grandfather's body was saturated with electricity, as if he'd been fibrillated. Jesse brought Powder to the small town of Vinton. She works at a boarding school for boys and plans to keep him here. The unusual young man attracts the attention of the boys playing soccer. Jesse tells her colleague that Jeremy is behaving like an unintelligent child who knows nothing about the world. In the cafeteria, Jeremy eats separately from the others. Of course, the local bullies couldn't ignore him. They approached him and asked him why he looked like a vampire. Jeremy tried to ignore their leader John, but he took away his food and said that all newcomers are tested. Namely, they have to keep the spoon on the tip of their nose like a Mitch, or in their ass. Powder took a spoon, rubbed it, and left it standing on the table. The rest of the cutlery immediately magnetized to it. Everyone in the dining room froze in place. Then another spoon showed up and danced and jumped to the others, destroying the whole structure. Powder smiled, but John gave him an unkind look. The sheriff has a complicated relationship with his son, and his wife Emma is terminally ill and in great pain. The whole town is already judging about the unusual guy. The nurse is sharing her opinion. "We don't need this defective guy. I don't know what he is, but he's not defective." The doctor examined Jeremy and declared him perfectly healthy. Soon he would be getting special lenses to keep his eyes away from bright lights. Jesse suggested that the young man go to a local school, and he agreed. By the first day of school, Jeremy received his lenses. Stepping off the bus, he immediately gathered surprised looks from all the students in the schoolyard. Physics is taught by Donald Ripley, an eccentric teacher, and he rolled out a device called Jacob's Ladder. It was invented to demonstrate electric current. Electric arcs arising one after the other make Powder uncomfortable. He is shaking all over. And the metal objects around him bounce and warp. Suddenly the electricity began to pass through Jeremy and back again. The boy was lifted into the air and levitated until Donald smashed the device. The teacher touched the boy and an electric current ran through his body. Reporters gather outside the hospital where Jeremy was admitted, but the sheriff won't let them in. Donald tries to get into the room, and the doctor reports that Jeremy shows no signs of electrocution. He's feeling fine, although there's a big hole burned in his sweater. The teacher concluded that Jeremy is an electrical conductor, which is why his hair isn't growing. Meanwhile, unnoticed, Powder had escaped from the hospital. The dandy was walking down the street when his classmate Lindsay's dog barked at him. She's surprised that the boy recovered so quickly. Lindsay noticed that Jeremy has a beautiful eye color, but he immediately took off his lens, which embarrassed her a little. Powder is stared at by all the neighbors. He admits that he can listen to people from the inside, all their thoughts and memories. But Lindsay didn't take his words seriously. Jeremy went back to his house, but the sheriff blocked his way. The boy feels that the sheriff's deputy is afraid of him. He says he doesn't want to go back to boarding school, and Jeremy can't stay in the hospital anymore. His worst memory, his birth, is connected to this place. A professor from the Ministry of Education came to the boarding school. The thing is that Jeremy passed the IQ test with a phenomenal result. It's interesting that he got all his knowledge from books. He cannot watch TV because all the equipment near him goes crazy, and he himself becomes bad. Tests show that Jeremy has the highest level of development in the history of mankind, but the guy doesn't care. The only thing he wants is to go back to the farm. He also knows that the professor really thinks he's a fraud and moved here just to prove it. Jeremy's pissed off and all the machinery around here is out of order. The boarding school kids went camping under the supervision of the deputy sheriff. Powder didn't want to go. A thunderstorm was coming and he could feel it with all his body. Lightning killed his mother. He personally remembers it happening. In the forest, all the lizards from the neighborhood came running to Jeremy, and he also felt Sword and John coming up behind him. The latter had a rifle in his hands and left it on Jeremy. But suddenly a shot was heard. The deputy sheriff had shot a deer and was very happy about it. A real hunter hunts not for the prey, but for the hunt itself. The animal was dying in agony. Jeremy touched the deer and grabbed the hunter's arm. He made him feel what his victim was feeling now. The man fell to the ground and screamed in pain. Jeremy only let him go when John nearly shot him. This pain and anguish passed through Powder as well. Jeremy tells the sheriff and the psychologist that he didn't attack the hunter, he just helped him to see and realize what he was doing. And he doesn't want to see anyone else, even Jesse only pretends to be his friend. The guy trashed the office with his mind. All he wants to do is go home. The doctor suggests the sheriff put his wife back in the hospital. She's torturing herself and him. But as long as Emma can talk, she asks to stay home. She's hopeless, but Barnum can't let her go. A frustrated Jeremy was sitting alone in the dining room that evening when a physicist approached him. Donald is fascinated by the unusual student. Apparently, he is almost entirely made of energy. It seems a little more, and he simply won't need his body. And his mind is at a level of development from which people are separated by millennia. It's as if he's a messenger from the future. Donald offered to be his friend and extended his hand to Jeremy. At the same time, he decided to show his teacher a trick and electrified him. His grandparents were always afraid to touch him. Deputy Sheriff changed a lot. He took all the guns out of the house and refused to participate in the shooting contest. He even stopped carrying a gun to work. The man admits that when Jeremy touched his hand, he felt wild fear and pain. It was like he was dying along with the deer. Since then, the man can't hunt anymore. It's like he took that deer's soul and put it in mine. At night, the sheriff came to Jeremy and asked him to go to his house. Barnum wanted to know what his wife Emma was thinking and feeling. Jeremy relays her thoughts. The woman won't be able to die peacefully until she knows that her husband and son have reconciled. Emma believes Jeremy is an angel who has crossed over to take her away. The woman asked to have her old silver ring put on her finger. For a short time, she even regained consciousness. Meanwhile, the anxious nurse called the sheriff's son to come here as soon as possible. His father came out and gave his son a big hug. At last Emma could go to heaven in peace. Jeremy shows up at the town fair. Everyone's staring at him, as usual. Powder reads the townspeople's minds. They think he just killed Emma. He tells Lindsay that all people think they live apart from everything. But each one of them is part of this world, everything is connected. Jeremy touched Lindsay and let her feel his heartbeat, read his thoughts and dive into his memories. His father thought Jeremy was ugly and always denied that he was his son. But in Lindsay's opinion, he had the most beautiful face in the world. The girl kissed Jeremy. But they were interrupted by her father, and he lashed out at the boy. Jesse managed to intervene before the man unraveled his arms. Powder again felt like the loneliest man in the world. He was not going to stay at boarding school any longer. So he packed up his things and was about to go to the farm, but decided to stop by the gym one more time to look at the most ordinary guys. There he looked at Sky in the shower room, his mane and hairy armpits. For this, John began to mock the young man and took his hat. And then Jeremy said the words his drunken stepfather used to say to John. He had beaten John all his childhood, which is why he had grown up so bitter. The big guy got angry and pushed Powder against the wall. Suddenly, there are thunderclaps. The scoundrel saw that Jeremy was frightened and dragged him outside with his friends. Only Meech tried to stand up for Powder, but John was not going to stop. After stripping the poor guy naked, he mocked his absolute whiteness. He should be painted. John laughed and kicked Jeremy into a muddy puddle. Then the two goons picked him up and brought him back to the main one. Lightning flashed right above them. Powder began to attract all the metal objects the bullies were wearing. Suddenly it was like Jeremy exploded with energy and scattered everyone around. The guys scrambled to their feet and John's heart stopped. Powder went over to him and started hitting him in the chest with electrical charges to restart his heart, and Jeremy managed to do it. Meech promised that he would help him escape from the boarding school. Jeremy hid in a car with haystacks and drove it to the farm. He finally got home and went down to the basement. Soon Jesse arrived here and found the guy in a completely empty room. Everything the young man once had was taken from here. She promises Jeremy that if he goes with her, they will definitely work something out. Donald has volunteered to help them, but the conspirators haven't escaped in time. The cops arrive. Jesse asks the sheriff to just turn away and let them escape. Thunder rumbled again. The sheriff took his partners aside and ordered him to get the hell out of here. For some reason, Jeremy didn't get in the car with Jesse. He told the sheriff that his wife hadn't gone anywhere, she was everywhere. Powder ran into the field spreading his arms, and lightning struck right at him. Jeremy ran and filled with energy until he dissolved in a bright flash of light. The powerful pulse traveled through the people. Powder became a part of everything, pure energy that no longer needed a human shell.